Trails to Azure is the 5th game in the Trails series. Labeled as Legend of Heroes 7, it is the 10th Legend of Heroes game ever made. Just don't think about that too much. Praised for its incredibly good character writing and world building consistent across all the Trails games, combined with a gripping plot that continues to make twists and turns all the way to the final minute, it is by general consensus one of, if not the greatest Trails game ever made. But we're not here to talk about the game itself, we're here to talk about something else entirely. Its difficulty, as a video game, on the hardest possible difficulty at that. Let's take a look, shall we? While difficulty settings have always existed for some of Falcom's major IPs like Ys, a difficulty setting did not always exist for the Legend of Heroes franchise. Before Trails in the Sky came the Gagar trilogy, where there was no difficulty setting and no New Game Plus. Each fight was tailored to what your exact level should be at the time, and there was no way to adjust it without just using some sort of external program, cheats, or otherwise modifying the game in some way. You may think that the static difficulty for which the game's designed around will be good for the game. You wouldn't need to account for any sort of stat inflation, you could balance the game and curate every fight to the player's level. And for a first-time player or players new to the genre, that may very well be true. Your first playthrough may be fraught with challenges and you have to overcome them. But eventually, you get really good at the game. You learn where all the buttons are, and you know how to even micro at a competent scale. And if you have those skills in your toolkit, the game without an additional difficulty and no New Game Plus starts to feel a little easy. In the background right now is a boss battle. This boss takes place around the first half of the second half of the game. Don't let that confuse you. If we were to compare the pacing to something like Trails in the Sky SC, I will say it is around the time where you fight Blue Blanc atop Esmela's tower in Trails in the Sky SC. So this is definitely not an early game boss by any means, and is supposed to be a fair amount of challenge. However, without really doing anything special, just spamming all of your most powerful attacks on the boss directly and focus firing it down, you can see that this boss doesn't really stand a chance, and in fact, it's already dead. I didn't even skip any animations, I just let all the animations play out, and it was dead. In case you think that's an isolated incident, it's not. Here's me doing the exact same thing to the first phase of the literal final boss of the game. This final boss is not necessarily the hardest fight in the game, granted he does hit decently hard, but there are definitely way harder encounters before it. His best trademark is he has access to a ton of super late game, super high level magic spells, and he can cast them at about a third of the time it takes, and if left unchecked he can very easily overwhelm you. However, because the whole AT cancel mechanic exists and it just allows you to act over and over consecutively, he really doesn't pose too much of a challenge. He's basically already dead here, and a lot of us have yet to attack. He's going to live long enough to get a single hit off, and then that's it. Now granted, I've played this game from start to finish dozens of times, and for each individual fight in this game, I've probably easily done over 100 attempts. So for me, a fight like this would be pretty trivial. I know this game like the back of my hand, and experience with the game naturally bequeath onto you mastery in the game's mechanics. But when times get like this and the bosses just melt, you really do wish there's something more waiting for you. Alright, here we go. Trails in the Sky FC, Nightmare difficulty. Let's go. Here's the fight. Let's get started. I mean, it's just Nightmare difficulty, just some stat inflation. How hard could it possibly be? Ah, I see. Okay, you know what? That was just unlucky. I mean, how was I supposed to know he get the crit and just one-shot me with it? You know, we'll move on, alright? Maybe in SC things will get a little better, and this time... I mean, I get this fight is optional, but... That's just mean. We can address the elephant in the room. Yes, Sky Nightmare is really hard. The game is just not balanced around New Game, and it admits as much. But on the other hand, you also have really funny ways to lose. I mean, just look at how I lose this fight here, and I'm surprised Kevin hasn't renounced Aidios after having this done to him, because Aidios was not on his side here. But while Agate just continuously top decks Spiral Edge after Spiral Edge and kills me, one must ask, am I really having fun? Like, is this fun to me? Yeah? Kinda? Everything is better in retrospect. I can sit here and comfortably tell you that I had a great time playing Trails in the Sky on Nightmare, but I'm sure that in the moment I was doing just about the exact opposite. I was regretting life choices, I was wondering if I was softlocked, I was wondering if I'd be stuck on this boss for the rest of time. But it was really fun. And those of us who take up the mantle of New Game Nightmare do so knowing that the game has some inane difficulty spikes and some frankly unreasonable moments, but it also brings with it moments of hype. Why did I walk into this? Well, stubbornness, pride, but also if somebody told you that eventually you'll be going up against Cassius Bright, you will want to fight him on the hardest difficulty, right? Well, and then he goes and does this. What the heck, man? Anyway, let's just move on to Crossbell. Crossbell is really weird. You come off Sky and you had a cast of 16 characters, but by the time you get into Zero, you'll notice that the cast of 16 has been reduced to 4. And at some point there must have been a board meeting in Falcom somewhere, and there's this executive guy and he stands up and goes, okay guys, we have a much smaller cast this time around, what do we do? And then some genius in the back must have raised his hand and just said, oh I know, what if we made all 4 of them just absurdly broken? Great idea, you get a raise. Like, that conversation must have happened at some point. I mean, after all, we have gone from 16 playable Hold on a second. 15 playable characters down to 4, and surely that might restrict things, right? Well, you think so. Each of the 4 members of the SSS, Lloyd, Ellie, Tio, and Randy, are masters of their own craft. And most importantly, as a team setting, they cover each other's weaknesses. They're all really good at their own thing, and when combined together, they make for a very formidable team. This team could even take on the entire world, and to be honest, that's kind of what they end up doing in Zero. But of course, what happens if we take away this team, and we leave Lloyd just by himself? Well, that's when we start to get into Azure. As much as Lloyd Bannings is my favorite boy, he's kind of garbage by himself. So much so that I was genuinely wondering who got really drunk and just made him the team leader for this Altair Lodge mission. The 3 people he's coordinating are all so much stronger than him, even Noel, and we'll get to that in a second. Arios and Dudley are both the carries of this team, so obviously, in typical game fashion, you're not going to be able to keep them for long. So our partner is Noel. How good is Noel? Well, the verdict is pretty good, at least for this stage in the game. You see, Noel has 2 attributes that really make her an invaluable member in the early game. The first trait is her ability to print money, and it's extremely simple to do. Step 1, go get in a fight. Step 2, find this Sepith tile. And step 3, and step 4, you're rich now. Congrats. And to be honest, throughout the entire time that you have Noel, that's pretty much the only use of Blast Storm. You can also Assault Rush to get virtually the same effect on one target, but that requires Noel to naturally land on a Sepith tile, which is pretty random. And Blast Storm by itself isn't necessarily the best boss killing tool, so why not use it to generate a lot of money? Money is, after all, the solution to all your problems. You want more Sepith? Done. You want more slots? Done. Everything can just be solved with more money. And Noel can get you a lot of early game income. Which brings us to the second thing that makes Noel really good in the early game, possibly the best early craft in the game, Sleep Grenade Heavy Smash. It's Heavy Smash. Don't get me wrong, Sleep Grenade is overpowered, but we'll get to that in a bit. Heavy Smash is the real star here. I call it the Nerf-Stick. This is the only craft in the game that can reduce an enemy's strength by minus 50%. No other craft comes close. You have some that can do minus 25, but nothing can nerf someone quite as heavily as Noelle can in just one swing. It can't be understated how important it is to cut an enemy's attack by that much. Just look at this clip here, where I tanked the same attack before and after the Nerf-Stick. The difference is really night and day, and this is something that you'll be relying on to survive in the early game until you're ready to, for better or worse, rip the game apart. In fact, here's footage of me using the Nerf-Stick in the prologue. And here's me doing the chapter 1, and 2, and 3. For most of the early game, the Nerf-Stick is what you'll be using to cut all of the damages down to reasonable levels. And here's the cherry on top. The Nerf-Stick works against most of the bosses in this game. In fact, with some really weird exceptions, a lot of the bosses in Azure just does not resist stat down at all, which means that the Nerf-Stick will cut all of their damages down. Fun fact, the first notable boss that starts to resist all stat down and all bosses thereafter is Campanella. And I guess Muramasa and the Jaegers too, but those fights are really easy. And let's be honest, by the time you get to Campanella, the Nerf-Stick will have long since ran its course of usefulness, but it doesn't diminish the fact that throughout the entire early game, Noelle's entire arsenal is invaluable for getting you through the harder parts of the game. And for that, she gets my seal of approval. Good job, Noelle. But this begs the question, what do we do if the Nerf-Stick doesn't work? Okay, let's do this. On my channel, I ran a YouTube series for 2 of the Trails games called From Blind to Done. It is me recording myself fighting every single boss in the game from when I first see them blind to when I finish the fight. I'm not the best Trails player in the world, so some of these fights do take longer than others. But this fight is an anomaly. This video is 2 hours long. It is my longest video in runtime. In fact, the second longest video isn't even close. So why is this fight so hard? If you played on a lower difficulty, you might not even notice why this fight is brutal, because you can just S-break and win in 30 seconds. On Nightmare, you don't really have that luxury, so you have to take them full force. And you know what they say, human suffering is worth 1,000 words, so I'm just gonna let the next clip play out, just to show you what I had to go through. Wow. Got it out for me, huh? Are you kidding me? Okay, maybe Nerf-Sticking isn't even good enough. They're so fast. 100 damage? 100 damage is... that's it? Wow. Alright, never cast ours with Lloyd. Rip. That's a rip. What you just saw was Lyn and Aeolia taking 5 moves in a row to do an insane amount of damage to my team. And before I go further, let me just take a second to explain how speed works in Trails to Azure. After performing any action, you have to wait a certain amount of delay. This delay value is calculated based on 2 other things: the base delay of whatever action it is you're taking, and your speed stat. The formula is actually extremely simple. It's the floor of those 2 values divided. As an example, a basic attack has a delay of 3000. In this clip, Lloyd has 50 speed, so if he wants to do a normal attack, he will have to go through 60 delay afterwards. And if Lloyd happens to have 119 speed, then the delay for the same normal attack will be cut down to 25. Around the time of the Lyn and Aeolia fight, you can expect to be at around anywhere between 50 to 60 speed. Lyn has 130. She's faster than both Innis and Enya. And Aeolia is no slouch either. Lyn can hit very hard, and Aeolia can apply every single status effect under the sun. Trying to beat these 2 as early as chapter 2 is a tall order, and that's putting it lightly. However, it's an optional quest, so you don't have to do it. Except you do really want to do it because the reward is the single best craft on Lloyd. You know that dinky craft Lloyd has by default, Axle Rush? Just spins in a tiny circle and kicks a few enemies away? Well, Lin will teach him how to improve it to Raging Spin. The circle is much wider and it now sucks enemies in, which makes it so much better as a utility craft, especially for what we're about to do. This craft is vital for beating the game with, because Lin and Aeolia taught us one thing. Sometimes, it's better to evade a barrier than getting over one. If you ever played this game before, you will have heard the term evasion tank from somewhere. Simply put, an evasion tank is somebody with 100% evasion. This makes them fully immune to any non-S-break, non-magic attack damage. While every single character in this game can hit a very high evasion rating, only Lloyd and Wazi can viably hit 100%. Of these two, Lloyd is probably the better one. He has a craft that can pull enemies into him via Raging Spin, and he is also always available. Although Wazi's presence in the story is also pretty formidable, he's not here for some of the most important bosses. The reason why these two characters can have 100% evasion is because their weapon slot can give them evasion. Lloyd in particular have Tonfas that can give him 10%. Using this 10% as a baseline, let's start stacking our boy up to 100. Start off in Main's Mountain Pass, run along this road, open up this chest, find these pairs of shoes and put it on Lloyd. These will be put on him for a long time and now he has 20%. Next, be really good detectives and get rewarded with these pairs of shoes and then give them to Lloyd. These are also 10% evasion shoes but are also very overpowered. Put it on Lloyd and these will be his shoes for the rest of the game. Now in chapter 3, run into this store, go talk to this store clerk and buy the Kagemaru Haori and then equip it to Lloyd. Congratulations, you will never take it off for the rest of the game. Yes, this is the best in slot armor for Lloyd and you found it as early as chapter 3. Next, open up Lloyd's Enigma and put in an Evade 3. Evade 3 will give him 20% more evasion chance. If you don't have an Evade 3, the earliest one you can find is in the Azure Islands. Open up this monster chest, kill the monsters inside, and bam, free evasion 3. If you want to make more, you have to wait until chapter 4 to do it at Windy. Finally, equip 2 evergreens onto Lloyd. Each evergreen is 20% dodge chance, so combined together, you're done. You hit 100%. If you want an evergreen, you can go to Imelda's antique shop and buy it. Imelda sells these at a very high price though, so oh my god. What? This is a shakedown. I'm not made of money, Imelda, what is this? Alright, clearly Imelda's just scamming us, so this is what we're gonna do instead. As early as chapter 2, you can talk to this guy and challenge him to a duel. You can easily beat him by catching a gold salmon with a deluxe dumpling. Once you beat him, use your fishing line at this hole and hook up this fish. Use this fish and give it to Jingo. Jingo can trade you an evergreen, but you can only do this once, and that saves you 80,000 Mira. And done! Congratulations, you have reached 100% evasion. It's time to rip the game apart, right? Two minor problems. This first problem is actually quite commonplace. Sure, Lloyd's a tank now, but what good is a tank if you can't draw aggro? After all, it doesn't matter if Lloyd is immune to damage if the enemies can just walk around him, or nuke everybody with an AoE, or just shoot through him, all of which can happen in this game. The solution to this is twofold. One is to just use Raging Spin and pull the enemy away from your pack. And if an enemy is looking directly at Lloyd, chances are Lloyd will be the one tanking most of the damage. This is more of an idealistic solution though, because sometimes enemies cheat, and Raging Spin isn't good enough, in which case we need the other option. Up until now, we haven't really talked about Lloyd's Master Course slot, and that's because we need to equip Keeper. Keeper is a master course that actually draws enemy aggro and forces them to attack Lloyd. It's not even a taunt debuff, it's just a persistent aura, so it works with almost everything. The only problem is, where do we get Keeper? Alright. Hey doodles. Alright, we got the Keeper now, let's get going. Nobody checked that room. We're just gonna be on our way now. With our evasion problem sorted, let's move on to our next issue. This is a list of all the Tonfas in the game, and notice how only 4 of them have evasion on them. You really don't want to equip Tonfas without evasion because that will drop her evasion rating to 90, and the 10% chance to get hit on Nightmare difficulty is usually problematic. And that's gonna be a problem. For a lot of the game, we're gonna be running with a pair of Tonfas from chapter 3. so Lloyd is gonna be lacking a bit in the damage department. In fact, you know that sentimental scene where he gets his brother's tonfas, and then you just don't equip it because you realize it has no evasion? And, I mean, okay, let's be honest, if Guy's tonfas actually did have evasion on them, maybe he wouldn't have been shot? I'm just saying. But speaking of detectives who aren't dead, we do have a pretty solid baseline to work with. Lloyd is immune to physical damage, and for S-crafts, we can zero field it away. For arts and magic attacks, we can always put up a reflex. Not only does it protect him, it's also a very potent boss killing tool by sending all of the boss's damage back at them. But as hilarious as this A-reflex strategy is, it's not viable for every boss. We really do need to find our own damage. There are 3 fights in this game that are considered particularly infamous. This one, and this one. We need a strategy to get through all of them. Let's start with this fight. This fight is the first one of the 3. And honestly, it has a mechanic that is pretty interesting in good and bad ways. This fight is on a 5-minute timer. A 5-minute, real-time timer. Frankly speaking, a mechanic like this doesn't really work in Trails. But I liked it. For me, it gave me a refreshing challenge. One that I've been craving for a while, and after this fight ended, I felt like I got my fill. On one hand, you could just sit here for 5 minutes and passively time him out, but if you actually want to win, you're going to have to find a way to take down his very impressive health pool. And how do we do that in a timely manner? The answer is simple. Bells! Well, not these bells. These bells. Bell cores are new to Azure, and they do make their appearance in later games as well. But in their inception, they are truly at their most broken form, in that they wipe all delay after casting each art. This allows you to just throw out spells like nobody's business and just keep slinging them out like some kind of arts casting minigun. By the time we get to the segment fight, we can viably get our hands on 3 different bell cores. We can get the Mars Bell from this treasure chest by casting a reflex and watching the bosses cast arts to kill themselves. We can get the Jupiter Bell from this chest by using Sleep Grenade on Noel paired with a Petrify course, because guess what? These spiders have no status resists whatsoever. And we can get the Saturn Bell from this chest by just having an evasion tank and taking no damage. We can do each of these 3 fights at a very early point in the game, somewhere around chapter 2 to 3. Definitely don't need to be in the mid-level 80s like these chests seem to suggest. These 3 bell cores allow us to rapid fire earth, wind, and fire arts. So now the question is, which art is the best one? Here we have a picture of all the decently high level arts in the game of those elements, and let me just tell you right now, we're not going to be using the first table at all. All of those arts are completely garbage. If just looking at the raw stats haven't convinced you of that, here's another reason why you shouldn't use them. Saturn Bell is 7 earth elements. You're going to have to get more elemental values for earth in order to use these arts. That involves putting on this quartz, which is just about the worst quartz in the game, and using any of these master quartz, which honestly none of them are really impressive for arts casters. If you really want to hamstring yourself and just insist on using Yggdrasil to kill everything for some weird reason, and you're playing on this difficulty, then you're a bigger masochist than I am. I can respect you for it, but I will definitely caution against it. Save that Saturn Bell for your Adamantine Guard, because you're gonna need that way more. And now we look at our fire and wind arts. In the wind table, there's really nothing special to write home about. Aerial is a little bit too low level for us at this stage in the game, and Thunder Cyclone is clearly garbage. It is only 10 more power than Sparkdyne, which is disproportionately weak considering how much more it costs. So we'll take those 2 arts right off the list, and we'll just be left with 1. Sparkdyne. Sparkdyne is great. It comes out super fast because of its low cast time, and you can keep throwing them out with Jupiter Bell. It also has a disproportionately high base power of 270, making it higher than both Magna Blaze and Flare Butterfly. It also has a very low EP cost, allowing you to use it over and over without too much worries of running out of EP for these fights. You're gonna be finding yourself coming back to this art a lot. But that being said, let's consider the other candidate, Crimson Ray. Crimson Ray is insane. For being merely 15 fire elemental values, it is the best single target DPS art in the game. Just look at this table where Crimson Ray goes head to head against some of the most overkill, high-costing arts in the game. It far outclasses every single one of them in either damage or EP cost, and it's super easy to get. Mars Spell and a level 5 Pixie Master Course, both of which are very preferred by arts casters, will take you to 12 fire elemental values already. The last 3 can be found pretty easily. With perhaps the only exception being the Sigmund fight, where it is strongly preferred to DPS him as hard and as fast as possible, Crimson Ray more than gives Spark9 a run for his money. It casts quite slowly, sure, but look at this damage difference, it's not even close. And honestly, from here, all you really need is somebody with Uranus Spell so they can keep up casting Fortunas and a Reflex at a moment's notice to keep the rest of your team alive. And from there, that's it. There's really not much else to say here. You have a winning formula with a tank who literally can't die, and a backline who can deal out some stupid amounts of damage. Even the hardest fights in the game will melt against this combination. That even includes the final boss, who has an attack that bypasses evasion checks, erases barriers on sight, and can literally cheat. But even against him, our setup is so incredibly stacked that these things that should break our strategy apart become nothing more than just minor inconveniences. I haven't even mentioned things like the Mobius Master Quartz, which basically gives us infinite resources, and this incredibly stupid fight. But I don't have to. We did it. We beat Nightmare difficulty. We've gotten over the barrier. Trails games on Nightmare difficulties have been getting easier and easier as the games go on. In fact, Cold Steel Nightmare is honestly a joke compared to Sky Nightmare. There are even mods out there that increase the difficulty of Cold Steel games to something that would be more akin to what it was like back in Sky. I have this strange insistence of playing all my games as vanilla as possible, so I didn't personally get it. Speaking simply from my own experience, once you get past the early game in Cold Steel, there really is no challenge anymore in the game. Now, whether this is because I've actually gotten way better at Trails since I started, or the games are just that much easier, I'll leave to your interpretation. Mind you, this isn't a scathing criticism of the game in any way. I fully believe that Cold Steel is a worthy successor to the series and a fantastic continuation of the storyline. But Azure has a very special place in my heart, as I'm sure it does for many others in the fandom. And this video serves as a tribute to the wonderful time I've had in Crossspell. This game truly has no equal. Thank you for watching. This video is my first ever attempt at scripting, storyboarding, and editing a video essay style production. Therefore, this video took me a very long time to put together. While I had a lot of fun during this editing process, I can't promise this is something I can do more of in the future, as it is exceptionally taxing of what little free time I have. Regardless, if you made it to the end, I sincerely hope I was able to provide you with about 30 minutes worth of entertainment, and I wish you great health and prosperous days ahead. Until next time.